on the podcast today, Chef Kim Kringley of the Dakota restaurant. You're in downtown Covington now.
Yes,
Yeah.
we finally made the jump.
Let's talk about the restaurant for a minute. How long has the Dakota been a part of our community?
We opened up in October of 1990, the original location. So, 24 years? Yeah.
Man, that's a good run.
34. It's been a haul, yeah.
Wow. So the Dakota, where does the name come from?
I'm from North Dakota. I was born and raised there and ended up moving out like 18 hours after I graduated high school.
No kidding.
Yep.
Did you have anyone in your family that was in the restaurant industry, or is this something you pursued on your own?
I have 3 older brothers that are chefs.
Really?
Or were chefs. 2 of them have passed away since, but one of my brothers actually owns 2 restaurants right now in Baton Rouge.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Where'd that motivation come from? Was it part of your family dynamic?
No, it was actually a friend of the family. He had a series of restaurants in our community, and we basically started working through him. My first job was 15 years of age, and I would go in on Saturdays, and we would cook Rocky Mountain oysters. That was my job, is frying. We call them bull fries back in those days, and but he would do a little buffet in the bar and sit back there and throw bull fries in the fryer all day.
I love it. So when did you know right from the beginning this business was for you?
I enjoyed doing what I was doing. I think I was fairly good at it. I had a lot of experiences through high school. But also, I used to fly airplanes in high school, too. So my big goal was to be a pilot. That was my plan. And then I got sidetracked and got into the culinary scene, so to speak.
So what brought you to Louisiana?
I gradually made my way. After North Dakota, I moved to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. My brother was a chef at a hotel out there, so I went to go work for him for a while. And then I ended up working for an Austrian chef out in Jackson Hole. And then he ended up moving to Dallas, so I followed him to go work for him in Dallas, and then made my way to Baton Rouge and then Covington.
So did you learn everything in the field, or did you study?
No, pretty much the School of Hard Knocks. You know, kind of learned as I went along. I worked for John Folse for about 3 years, and ended up being his corporate executive chef and traveling the country and the world, and his operations that he had going on in Donaldsonville.
Oh, right on.
In Baton Rouge.
So yeah, that's a major connection here in Louisiana. I
Yes.
think on the international stage, even John Folse is no.
Oh yeah.
He's no Johnny come lately.
No, not at all. He's been going at it for a long time, and I actually headed up his project when we went to Russia in 1987, I believe, for the Gorbachev Reagan summit. We went over there and opened up a restaurant for 10 days.
Holy moly!
In a hotel in Moscow.
That's cool.
Yeah, of course, that was before, the wall came down and everything else.
Yeah, when things were still really sketchy.
Oh, yeah. You kept looking over your shoulder.
I've had the very good fortune in the jewelry industry to travel around the world a bit, and in many of the major cities here in the U.S., and then they got good food everywhere.
Right.
But something about it here in Louisiana, people, we don't have this reputation for nothing.
Well, and the big thing is, you look at the Louisiana pantry, the fresh seafood, the oysters, the crawfish, the shrimp, the fish, and of course the wild game that everybody likes to, dive into down here. Basically nothing's off the table, so to speak.
That's true.
Except for the nutria. I never got on that bandwagon.
So let me just speak to that for a moment. Have you ever tried it?
No.
Let me tell you from firsthand experience, nutria is delightful.
That's what I've heard.
It is an absolute fact, my man. Those little critters, they live in the water and they eat roots. Now, I know visually they're unappealing because of the rat-like disguise.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what, that's where the similarities in.
I've had a lot of people from the Louisiana Agriculture Department trying to push it on me down the road.
It's a
years back, when they were trying to push it and kind of get rid of some of the critters and so on and so forth. But it's just something I could not dive into.
I saw Paul Prudhomme on TV trying to cook nutria on a morning show one time.
Yeah.
And I thought it was odd. But I got to tell you, after seeing this, and I was a kid, I must have been about 10 years old. After I saw that, I said, well, hell. And I went out and I got me one.
Right.
And I took it home and we browned it and made like a gravy like you would with squirrel or rabbit or something like that. It's incredible. Now, it's funny. I went on a camping trip with some friends of mine down the Mississippi River this past, last year in February, and we shot a nutria, and I had brought some sausage and some rice while we were camping, and I cleaned that nutria, and I made nutria and sausage jambalaya, and it was.
Came out good, huh?
It was dynamite.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it at all. But I think it's a hard sell in a fine restaurant.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I believe so. Frog legs are hard enough.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like, okay, here, try some nutria.
So in your restaurant, what do you draw from primarily as your guide for the type of food that you produce?
Well, my approach is I like a lot of freshness. I like high quality products. And I'm always looking for presentation. I'm looking for texture on the plate somewhere, different textures. If, I'm not into a plate that's a lot of soft food. I want some crunch or something somewhere on the plate, and of course the sauces and everything else. So,
Would you describe your style as primarily like a French Louisiana, or is it a fusion type?
I would say I have a lot of French influence, European influence, so to speak. I love Spanish style food. I love, of course, Louisiana is all that melting pot of different cuisines. The Cajuns from the Acadiana land and their approach towards foods, and then the Creoles with all their influences on, different cultures of what they brought to the state and put in a pot and put on the table.
Yeah, we have a tremendous variety here, and I think a lot of times it's overlooked, the Asian influence that we have here in Louisiana because of all the Asian people in New Orleans East.
Absolutely.
Those restaurants over there are fantastic.
They are. I've eaten in Chinatown, and I've in San Francisco, and I've eaten down there, and it's just as good.
Oh yeah, I've been to China. The best Chinese food I've ever had was in San Francisco.
Yeah. I believe it. It is good.
It's very good.
Yeah, and then you get into the dim sum and all that. It's like, as soon as you're full, then they bring out the really good stuff.
Oh, one of the best meals I've ever had in my life was in Hong Kong. I had the very good fortune of going to a large family style dinner with some people who owned a jewelry factory in Thailand, and they were Chinese, and they invited us to go to dinner, and they had big tables with the big like, giant lazy Susan in the middle, and they just bring out stuff.
Just keep piling it on.
It just keeps coming. And I said, I'm gonna taste everything. I'm not gonna say no to anything. And I've always been, adventurous when it comes to food. I'll taste anything twice.
Right.
And man, we had everything. We had all the classic, duck dishes and wild seafood stuff and the 1,000-year-old eggs.
Right.
Oh, they're wonderful. Mm-hmm. They're delicate and there's nothing funky about it. It's absolutely it's elegant. It's absolutely elegant.
Right. Well, they've been practicing their craft for thousands of years.
It's true. It's true, and I think their food culture is incredible.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: do you watch any of these travel and food culture shows?
Some of them I do.
Did
yes.
you watch Anthony Bourdain?
I watched some of his material. Yeah. Some of it was interesting. Some of it, I got engaged in it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Some of it was kind of weird. But a lot of it was good. And a lot of those people got outside of the normal. I grew up watching cooking shows.
Right.
When I was a kid, we'd come home after church on Sunday and, there would be cooking shows on television and we would watch Justin Wilson.
Oh, yeah.
And who's the old French guy? Oh, God, I can't remember his name. He
From Louisiana?
No. He's not from Louisiana. But he cooks these beautiful, elegant, simple French dishes.
Right.
And he just does it with such respect and precision. And I watched Julia Child the other night, one of her from the 70s, late 70s. She was in France, and they were at a restaurant, and they were roasting ducks, and they were doing he had a duck press.
Right.
And they were pressing ducks and
getting all the juice out.
Oh, I've never seen that stuff before.
Yeah.
And I find it's just remarkable. It really is. And there's a whole world of adventure out there, and that's the way I look at food.
Oh, I agree.
And I imagine a lot of your patrons to your restaurants are not going there for an ordinary experience. They're going there to have something special.
And some go to have what's expected of them, or of us in food style or whatever. But, you try to be cutting edge on the other side, some creativity or something different, something maybe they've never tried before.
How often do you add new dishes to the menu?
We try to change some of it seasonally. Like, we'll be starting to move into a spring menu, and then kind of summer more lighter fare.
I love that.
And then the fall, kind of getting into the colder weather, more braised items, a little bit heavier. So, that's the fun side of it. And some things will stay the same throughout, they kind of, it's like our crab and brie soup, kind of like it's year round. It's like, how can somebody come in there and eat a bowl of crab brie in the middle of July when it's 108 degrees outside?
I had that last week. It was fantastic. Yeah. It was fantastic. Man, that's cool. Now, the new restaurant is beautifully designed and put together.
Thank you.
You guys put a tremendous amount of effort into that, and it shows immediately.
Right.
To anyone who's not been there, I recommend that you go. And in passing, the first thing you'll notice about this location is when you pass on the highway, the restaurant doesn't look very big because the very, very tail end of the restaurant faces the road. But if you take the drive around the side, you'll see that the restaurant is quite large and goes on for a good bit. And there's ample parking just around the corner, and there's a little bridge that takes you from the parking lot to the restaurant. Lots of parking. I found parking to be, that's a problem for a lot of restaurants.
Well, it's downtown, and, there's really no parking for most of the businesses except for what's available. Yeah. Parking lots are on the street somewhere down the street or wherever.
Was it hard finding? Now, you did mention to me that when you started to build the new restaurant, that you guys decided for whatever reason to keep it a secret where it was going to be. How did that come about?
Well, it just started off that way. People kept asking, and we just kind of kept it to ourselves. And then finally, we decided just to keep it to ourselves. Kind of like
it became fun.
Yeah, keep people, talking about you.
Yeah.
Well, we would have friends call us up and say, I'm so-and-so. You can tell me. It's like, no, I can't.
When I tell anybody.
I even had my children driving around downtown Covington trying to figure out what building it was. But of course, the deception was that building looked so small from the front.
Yeah.
People like, I think that's where the Dakota's going. It's like, no, that building's too small.
It'll never fit.
They'll not. There's not even a room for a kitchen. And then once you walk inside, it's like, wow, this place is huge.
Now, what prompted the move? How long had you been?
Well, we had been looking at moving for the past 10 years or so. We had looked into a couple of projects and put some numbers together, and, it didn't make sense, or, different, the planets weren't lined up, so to speak. And, and then our restaurant, finally got sold to a different business, so they wanted to move in there. We extended our lease a little bit, and we were kind of hoping not to have a year and a half shutdown, but that's just the way it turned out. It took a long time to get our permitting process and get the final everything up and going. So,
how long did it take to find the spot that you were in? Did you consider a bunch of different locations?
Well, we had considered a couple, but by the time we had closed the old Dakota, we had already designed that building with the architect. I wasn't quite finished with the kitchen design yet, but pretty much the blueprint was 75% finished. And then as soon as we closed, I finished out the kitchen blueprint and some of the details and all that. So, and then the permitting process went into effect, and then, the build-up process.
It's always a drag.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. I think anytime I did a remodel here a few years back, and by the time I was finished with it, man, I was really over it.
Right.
I was ready to get back to work. And there was an interruption in my business, and that's a frightening feeling.
It is.
It's hard. It's really hard to manage that.
Well, we fortunately we had a ghost kitchen we were working out of, so we were doing catering throughout that term. So we do a lot of weddings and things of that nature. So it kind of kept us from getting rusty, so to speak.
Having a thriving catering business alongside a very well attended restaurant That must be like having another business.
It really is, but we had become so good at it. It's like when we had closed the restaurant, what was that, in 20, it was after COVID, and all these weddings in New Orleans had gotten backed up. So that October, November, December, January was just full of weddings in the middle of our restaurant business on 190, which was extremely busy because everybody was so tired of staying home. They're just like, we're going out for dinner. And they weren't going to New Orleans for whatever reason, So our business had picked up immensely prior to closing, and our catering business was like probably the best it had ever been. So it was like nonstop.
I've noticed a similar experience in my business as well. For whatever reason, people have not enjoyed traveling to the city as much,
right?
And it's been a real boost to the economy here in the North Shore. I've had my jewelry store here for 20 years, and one of the things that I noticed right off the bat is that people have a lot of their loyalties lie in the city where they grew up or where they work.
Sure.
And that's a habit of human
nature. That's their hometown for a lot of these people.
Yep. And not only that, but I think Mandeville and the North Shore in general also really had limitations.
Right.
There wasn't an ample selection. Although we have had very interesting restaurants over the years. Scattered about. There was La Provence for a long time. Do you remember in Abita, Artesia?
Oh yeah,
that restaurant.
Yep.
I was a young fella when that restaurant was going, and some friends of mine who were a little bit older asked me if I enjoyed. We were talking about food one day, and I was telling them how much I like to cook and all this stuff. And they said, "Have you been to Artesia?" And I said, "No, I've not." They said, "It's an experience." And they brought me there, and that, I'll say, as a young person, that was one of the first dining experiences that I ever had that was just an over-the-moon ride, adventure. Right. I had never been to a restaurant before where they brought several bottles of wine to the table, and they put a glass of each, and then there were little items coming, and we were having a little bit of this,
and we
were having it with this wine, and of course, per the instruction of the gentleman who brought me, and also the chef, he was saying, I recommend this with this and that with that, and I just didn't know it could be that way.
Right.
It was
open up your eyes to a whole different.
It did.
Yeah.
It did, and oh geez, what was the chef's name that he was a rather celebrated chef here in Louisiana.
You talking about John?
Yeah, John Besh.
Yep.
John Besh was there, and he was a younger fellow at that time, and I believe after he left there, he opened up his restaurant August in the city, and had a real good run in the restaurant industry after that. But I remember going to La Provence. Did you know Chef Chris at La Provence?
Oh yes.
He was something.
Yeah, we did. He was good friends with John Foles. So both Chef Chris and Cara Giorgio was in New Orleans. We would travel on the road sometimes together, and they were characters.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Chris was a handful.
Yeah,
the fellow that brought me to Artesia, he and Chris were very good friends, and he would have parties at his home from time to time, and he had a batonk course, or a boule. It's like I think it's like bocce ball,
right?
But a very classic European
version.
Exactly. It was the old version, and we played batonk and had wine and had cheese, and I really got to witness him the way he kind of did things, and this wonderful appreciation and just glory-like experience, the relationship that he had with food and wine and cheese and meats.
He was into it. He was very talented chef and had that old school mentality, and I had some friends who used to work for him, and he just had that European attitude.
Yep.
Get the job done.
Yep. And so let's talk about that for a minute too, because I noticed at your restaurant, the server, she referred to you as Chief.
Right. That's been my nickname for like 35, 40 years.
Now, I know there's an extraordinary amount of moving parts, especially at a restaurant.
Right.
Things can go incorrectly very, very quickly. And I know you have to produce you have to have standards, and then you have to really enforce those standards. Which I think, a lot of chefs, like Gordon Ramsay, for example, he has this reputation for just being this, wild, emotional person, because they do that because they want to keep everybody in line. It's like a drill sergeant
right.
in the military. Then you can, of course, he hams it up for the camera, I imagine, and some of that looks quite natural.
I don't have a camera, and it comes out natural.
Yeah, well, but I think you have to have those standards, and you have to create that environment of authority where people respect you and they know you are clearly in charge.
Right.
And I think that moniker chief comes along with that.
Well, and I think it's not so much about me, it's about the way things should be done correctly. If you've been told a way to do it, and why is it not being followed through, or sometimes common sense isn't being, administered in whatever you're doing. And it's like, come on, really? Just use your brain, so to speak.
Well, I think, as a business person, you have to share those expectations with the people that work with you, because your clients, they come in and they have that
they expect it. And that's what I tell people when they walk through our doors, whether it's a catering event or, through our front doors of the restaurant. It's not just me. It's just they have an expectation of what they're going to receive. And we have to live up to it or achieve, above that. Yeah. And, we can't allow, even though things, do slip through the cracks, whether it's front of the house, back of the house, whatever it might be, just a domino effect of things happening. You just have to stay on it at every moment to make sure all the gears are working properly.
Well, you're definitely doing it. You've been doing it for quite some time. So I just have a tremendous amount of respect for that, because I know how hard that is.
Well, and the big thing is hiring good people and having good people work for you. And thank God over the years we've been blessed with that. We had Cayman Sinclair work for us for years, and Maurice Roquette, and some other managers, back of the house chefs had worked for me 15 years, and just talented people that have a passion for, delivering a great product, and that's what it's all about. That's what gets us up each morning. It's like, let me go create some wow factor, today. Otherwise, you just stay in bed. Otherwise it's just another day of work. But when you're creating that wow factor, or that dining experience that people, expect of you and love of you, that's what makes it all worthwhile. And, even at this point, people say, well, what, you really want to open up another restaurant after all these years? And I'm like, I still enjoy what I do. I have a passion for what I do. I have a passion for people doing great things as well. When you see other people step up to the plate and, a manager or an employer create a great product, it's like, wow, great.
Yeah, that is
to be an inspiration, because, I had a lot of that in my life, whether it's working, as a teenager in North Dakota, or, working for an Austrian chef out in Jackson Hole. He rode me hard, but he trained me.
Yeah, you got results.
Yes.
I've always felt in my work that money's important, because without it you can't move forward. So
right.
You have to have money. But if you focus solely on the money, that's short-sighted.
Right, exactly.
You have to focus on what you're trying to achieve and what your client's experience is. And if you do all of that, the money comes automatically.
Right.
I genuinely believe that. You have to be smart, of course, along the way. You have to think in a business-like way.
Well, and that kicks in. It's almost like a rock star. In the beginning, all they want to do is play music and party like rock stars. Mm-hmm. And then 10 years into it, they look at their bank account and say, well, wow, where'd it go? And it's kind of like the same thing as being a chef. You just want to create great food. No, don't worry about how much it costs or whatever, or how many people it takes to put it together. Just create great food. And then, being a business owner, it has to blend together. It has to make sense. It has to, be worthwhile, so to speak, to be able to pay people that are, have much higher expectations of a salary nowadays than they had 5 years ago, much higher. So you have to pay those people better, and, and all the other costs involved, the food cost especially, things are just like a roller coaster out of whack, and eggs 1 week are $30 and next week they're $50 a case. It's
man.
like, what, you get on the phone and like, what's going on? 2 birds died in Iowa and the price went up or something crazy.
It is crazy. I find that, the cost of materials in all industries is just going wild. I've certainly seen it in the jewelry business, gemstones and metals and things like that have just gone berserk.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
No.
So you just have to work within those confines of what's given to you.
Right.
He's like, well, this is what I got to work with. Everyone else is working with the same
Right.
problem. So I think what ends up happening in my business, and I'm sure it happens in yours too, because I use the restaurant business when I'm trying to communicate with clients who are coming to me and they don't know who I am. They don't know what I'm trying to do. I explain it to them, and I use the restaurant metaphor quite a bit in that there's always somebody who can produce something of less quality for less money.
Absolutely.
And you can reduce the quality of things until you end up with McDonald's.
Right.
You can take a hamburger can be a beautiful, wonderful thing. There's nothing. Hamburgers are awesome, but you can surely squeeze all the life out of them until you're left with something that's just extremely unflattering.
Absolutely.
And I think any industry can be that way. Something else, and I want to talk about the layout of the restaurant a little bit, but something that comes to mind for me when I think about businesses, especially businesses that are successful, that have a really good track history, is the public perception. How people see you, or how they see your business, or the I guess the idea of a public. There's like a persona that comes along with a restaurant.
Smoke and mirrors.
Well, it's to a degree, but there's this mystery.
Right.
There's this mystery that comes along with a restaurant, especially one that, or really any business, but restaurants seem for some reason to have the market cornered on it. There's like a certain amount of celebrity,
right,
that comes along with being the man behind the curtain at a successful restaurant. It's sort of always been that way, don't you think?
I think probably people like Wolfgang Puck and Jeremiah Towers kind of built that up a little bit more back in the 80s almost, the mid to late 80s. They became celebrity chefs and everybody,
Did you not see that before then?
There was a little bit before, but it was kind of like not as big as it, as it kind of exploded into. Of course, that was around the time Paul Prudhomme made his big breakthrough, and in the public, and so it kind of elevated itself back in the late 80s.
Well, I think it's definitely still going on, and there's a wonderful element of excitement when you go to a fine restaurant,
right,
that doesn't really exist in other restaurants. It's I don't know. You got to check a certain number of boxes, and then suddenly you've created this environment,
right,
that meets this standard. And people, when my wife and I visited your restaurant, you walked us around, and I was really impressed with the amount of effort that you put into designing that place. And you told me you guys took a lot of time and,
right,
and a lot of care. But I mean, the carpet, the tables, the artwork, the colors, the location of the bar, the way everything is laid out, it's quite lovely.
Well, and a lot of that goes to my business partner Kenny, and we have a girl, that Beth Walther, who's done a lot of design for us over the years. And those two put their heads together. Kenny travels a lot over in Europe and different places, so he kind of wanted to create that, that European, elegant, semi-casual atmosphere in the place, along with our history of the Dakota food and doing new things and things like that. And it's really a good combination, because we always felt as though the old Dakota building, it was out of date, even though we did some changes after the pandemic, put in new carpet and new wall colors, but it still felt a little bit dated. And we always knew for the past decade that we wanted to make a jump somewhere. So it worked out perfect.
It had I'll say it had a parlor-like quality to it. I don't know if it was because the some of the rooms were a little tighter, or maybe the ceilings were a little lower, or whatever it was. But it had this. It had a more of like a. It reminded you of a. Of a restaurant from an older movie.
Right.
It had that kind of quality. The place that you have now is it's cutting edge.
Yes,
it really, really is. So,
it's got a fun feel to it, and that's exciting for us.
Well, I'm very excited for you, and I'm also happy it's closer to my house, so I can go more often.
Perfect.
I can go more often. So we got you brought me in the kitchen, and your kitchen is fantastic.
Well, thank you.
The first thing you said is not quite as big as I would like it to be, but you've got a really pristine array of equipment in there, and it's laid out beautifully.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty much the same footprint I had at the old location. Because after Katrina, we ended up gutting the old location kitchen and creating a new one for catering. So, two things can kind of happen at the same time. You have the front of the house putting out food, and you can do prep for catering in another section. So we kind of took that blueprint and, switched it over, and it shrunk a little bit, but, for the most part, it works.
I know it takes a lot of years to orient your equipment. I've certainly had the same experience in my jewelry shop. The idea of putting one piece of equipment here and then moving this piece of equipment over 6 inches so that you can put this thing in here.
Right.
It's a migration it takes years to work that stuff out.
Yeah, and we're still in the works in the new location. We have a list of things that we need to make us, more efficient or better organized or whatever, just more effective. So it's always a work in the process.
Wow.
It's kind of like a menu, you just keep working on fun things, new things, keep recreating and just have a little fun with it in the process.
That shows that your heart's in it. I think a lot of places make the mistake of they set a menu and then they know what they need to buy.
Right.
And they keep the food costs down. I know food costs is important. You don't want to have waste, and you have to come up with interesting things to do with some of these pieces that you don't necessarily use, whether it's making stocks or sauces or things like that.
Right.
In an effort to mitigate some of those food costs. But I think it's good on you for making the effort to keep it exciting, because I think a lot of places that I would probably go to more often, I don't, because I feel like, they got that. They're going to have that.
Right.
When I go to a place like yours, I'm like, I can't wait to see what they got.
Right.
It could be anything. So that's certainly not lost on people. It's certainly not lost on me.
Well, and it's like this past week we ran, beautiful lamb racks and a grouper dish. And grouper's not a cheap fish, So, but it's like once again, we want to create an experience for these customers that come in on Valentine's week and, put some extra energy and money towards it and, create a great experience for them.
What's the seasonal experience like, being a restaurateur? Is it a roller coaster of up and downs and periods and times that you've gotten familiar with?
It's fairly consistent. The meat industry always takes a hike during the December months. I guess because of they call it supply and demand. And so meat prices always go up. Crab meat in Louisiana always gets insane in December. And some other fish prices as well, but it's fairly expected right now. It's like a systematic pattern, unless something crazy happens. Like I know right now, Louisiana crawfish.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of hurting this year. So.
My dad used to be in the seafood business, and he had a seafood restaurant for quite some time, and he sold a lot of oiled crawfish. And on his best year, he sold almost 1 million pounds of boiled crawfish.
Holy cow!
If you can imagine,
that's a lot.
Truckloads upon truckloads of crawfish. And he spoke to one of the guys who provides crawfish for him. He's a very, very large distributor of crawfish out of Southwest Louisiana, and he said that he bought 4 sacks of crawfish and he paid $300 a sack.
Oh, Lord.
Can you believe
That's insane.
And I wouldn't have believed this,
Yeah.
but my father told me this, and he spoke to the man who he has bought for decades. He bought from this guy. he said the guy went and ran 1,000 traps or whatever, and he came up with 4 sacks of crawfish.
That's it.
And so the guy said, look, this is my gas, this is my bait, this is my cost, this is what I got to get.
Right.
And it was $300 a sack. And he sold them.
You just well get lobster at that price.
You may as well.
Yeah.
You absolutely may as well. Wow. So let me ask you this. I know you're just out of the gate with your new location, and it's hard to foresee the future when you're so diligently involved in the present, but
right.
What do you have future plans at this point? I know you, it's kind of a hard question, but I mean, do you see a trajectory for the years to come with the restaurant?
Well, we love longevity and settling in, and so now once we've gotten past our first, 4 months now, kind of moving into new menu items, like you sat outside in that dining area outside we have behind the restaurant, kind of exposing that a little more, and moving into the springtime and people enjoying themselves out there, doing fun bar menus, just fun food.
Do you have events at the restaurant often?
Yes, yeah, we'll do. We have private dining rooms, and we have we've done buyouts, a few of those already. Where they
What's a
buyout? They come and take over the whole restaurant
for a big party or something.
Yeah, the whole group. Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
I want to do that one day.
Yeah.
When I grow up.
Yeah. We all have to have expectations.
I know. But that kind of stuff, I get so excited about that. When people do that, it's a real statement of, you're really sort of harpooning, planting a flag in the idea that this is important.
Right.
And it's the sort of thing, some people may think that sort of stuff is silly, but I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
It's like making it to the North Pole.
Exactly. I mean, that's a hell of a thing to do.
Yeah. So
I think whenever you do things on a high level, and I've certainly seen this in my industry, there's almost, in the jewelry industry, it's very tight knit and closed. It's very, very closed, very, very difficult industry to break into.
Right.
Because there's almost this philosophy of people don't want to show you what they're doing because they don't want you to discover their secret sauce, because there's this fear that you may run away and start some competitive empire. But I think that's a short-sighted vision, because I think if you have people around you who are dedicated and have talent and have potential, if this person works for you or works with you for 6, 8, 10 years or whatever, and then they go on to do something on their own, I think it's a feather in your hat.
Absolutely. And in some ways, they do try to copycat what we've been able to accomplish over the years, and and sometimes, but that's never hurt me.
No. If I can take this opportunity for what you and I are doing here to inspire a young person, or inspire a person who's sort of going through their work life and they have hope for doing something better someday, good.
Right.
Do that.
Yes.
Do that. And come work for a guy like me, come work for a guy like you, and see how somebody who does it on a high level, see how they do it.
Right.
Spend 5 years, spend 6 years. Learn. Stick around long enough to learn. If you want to go and open your own palace of pleasure for people,
right?
Good.
Yeah.
Go do it. But at least you would have the opportunity to have somebody on board for however many years that would be.
Right. And an example of that is when I was working out in Jackson Hole, I started to work for an Austrian chef. And I was basically his breakfast and lunch cook. And I told him, his name was Peter, Chef Peter. And I told him, I want to come and learn dinners, because I saw what he was doing. And I saw, a real European chef kind of creating some things that I'd never seen before. So I just started showing up for dinner. I'm like, you don't have to pay me. I'm here to learn. And, he would have just almost physically and mentally abused me as much as he could to try to drive me away, but he couldn't shake me off. And then finally he put me on the dinner shifts. And then within a couple of years, I was his sous chef, executive sous chef for 2 different restaurants. And, he finally realized this person is serious about learning food. So we would have long talks about his experiences working at, different hotels throughout the country or the world, or cruise ships or whatever. And I would just soak it all in and say, teach me, teach me. You know?
As a young person, it takes a lot of grit to do that.
Yeah.
And generally you have to have a fire in you.
Right.
When I got into my field, I knew nothing of the jewelry industry, but I was very young, but I was keenly inspired, and I was willing to do whatever it took. And I think, in today's culture, it's a bit of a problem, because a lot of people, especially young people, when they're met with adversity, they don't handle it well.
They run and hide.
They have a tendency to bail out, and I hate to see that. I wish things were a little different.
Right.
And I think, I heard a fellow speaking about this dynamic of applying pressure to somebody who's new, who's coming in.
Right.
And it's oftentimes misinterpreted, especially these days, as meanness. But what it is it's testing.
Absolutely.
They're testing to see if you can take the pressure.
Right.
They're testing to see if in the event of a real, when the shit hits the fan, right? When it's crunch time, when things are just going at absolute at 110%, will you have the fortitude to carry on,
right,
and to be reliable?
Right.
And I think that's, in the construction industry, this is quite common. I have a few friends who are very talented builders and whatnot, and they have a tendency to really grind on these young guys.
Right.
And I was having a conversation with this guy the other day, and he told me, he's like, these young guys, I can't train them, because the training style that I use of applying pressure to these kids to get them to understand that when things go wrong, I need to know I can rely on you.
Right.
When the ladder's falling from under me and I look to you for help, what are you going to do?
Right.
Are you going to act, or are you going to tremble in fear?
Right.
And I think that same dynamic exists in any environment where you have to rely on people.
Right. And a good example of that is so-called stepping up to the plate. I was in high school, and I was getting ready to start a new job at a local hotel up in North Dakota with a friend of mine from high school, working in just the breakfast and lunch shifts. And he called me up one Saturday morning. He's like, Kim, I need you to come in. There's a blizzard coming in, and I live like 4 blocks away. And, of course, the chef can't make it in. Nobody can make it in. I'm here by myself. So I ended up going up to work with them, which I was going to start work the following week with them. And we ended up getting snowed into this hotel, with the hotel completely booked, with probably 300 people in the hotel, with just he and I, a dishwasher, and whatever breakfast wait staff there was that day. And for 3 days, he and I had to produce food to feed all these people in a blizzard. Nobody could go anywhere. No groceries were coming in. We ended up staying in a room in the hotel, and it was just like step up to the plate, get it done. And it was fun because, ladies that were staying in the hotel, they would come back in the kitchen. We finally went to a buffet on everything because we just couldn't keep up anymore. Mm-hmm. So ladies in the hotel would come back and start making salads or some of their family recipes, or what do we have to work with. I mean, that cooler and freezer were gutted by the end of the 3 days.
That's an adventure, though.
Oh, yeah. It was fun. But we had a great time. And I remember at one night leaving the dinner shift, and it was like a Holiday Inn Holidome with an indoor pool and all that stuff. And people were bored, so they were just sitting out in the area. And we would leave the kitchen and going up to our rooms, and everybody was start clapping and applauding. And, here we are, 2 16-year-olds, just getting the job done, doing what it has to, what we have to do to feed these people.
Well, I think it's awesome, and I love those kind of experiences when when the pressure's on. What do you do? It's very humanizing. It's and you make the best of it, and even in tough situations in business, I have certainly seen it. When you rally together with your people and you make it happen, there's a great enjoyment in that, and I certainly feel I have the same thing. I feel the same thing. So, man, listen, this has been such a treat. I'm very, very much honored that you would take the time. I know you're a very busy man, and so thank you so much for coming and talking with me. And I hope to see you again in the restaurant soon.
All right, I appreciate it.
Let's do this again some other time, man.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.